Well, good afternoon and welcome to this EURAXESS webinar series. Thank you for joining us. My name is Susanne and I'm the regional representative for EURAXESS ASEAN based in Singapore. And next to me here first is my colleague Tomasz.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Tomasz. I'm based in Seoul, in charge of EURAXESS here in Korea. I am very happy to welcome Korean researchers or Korea-based researchers. I can see some familiar names in the attendees list, so I have no doubts it will be an informative event for you. Thank you very much for joining.
Excellent. And as you know, what we're talking about today are the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions individual fellowships. These are postdoc fellowships, and you know that the call is currently open, closing on the 9th of September. And we are very, very happy to have with us an expert today. We have Dr. Branwen with us. She is a senior advisor based currently in Brussels with a UK research office, UKRO, and she is the national contact point for the MSCA, which means she is really the expert that can give you advice how to do your application in a manner that you have the greatest chance of being successful with your application. The webinar today is called Submission and Evaluation. So Branwen will focus on that. Maybe just a few words about Branwen herself. She has a PhD in life sciences from the UK. She's originally from Canada, but I think she's been in the UK for many years. She's joined UKRO in 2000, so she has, quite a long career advising researchers like you today on how to develop a grant proposal that has success. She's also has some personal contacts. I think her husband himself, was a grantee. He got an individual fellowship, so she's looked at this process from both sides. And I think without further ado, we will hand over to Branwen. And Branwen, I will be making you now the presenter so you can share your slides. Thank you.
Just on the logistical side, I think you all can see a question dashboard on the right. Please feel free to ask any question during the presentations. We will collect them and address them later during a Q&A session.
Can I just check that everybody can see my screen now?
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. So thank you very much, and thank you for the welcome and for inviting me to come in and speak today. So just to confirm, yes, I've been doing this for quite some time now, and my husband has been an individual fellow, but also a supervisor. So we've got quite a wealth of experience in my household for Marie-Curie. And hopefully we can answer as many questions today and really support some excellent applications. So the idea behind today's session is to give a little bit of an overview of the scheme and really to focus, however, on the submission process and the evaluation criteria and really thinking about how to develop a very good and successful individual fellowships application with a little bit of some feedback from an expert evaluator from a session that we had earlier in the UK. So just to start with a little bit of an overview about Marie-Curie in general. So the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions actually fits within the Horizon 20 structure within what was called Pillar 1, which is entitled Excellent Science, which is really important to really emphasize that excellent science is really an integral aspect of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, along with the European Research Council grants, the future and emergent technologies and research infrastructure. But what also is equally important to understand is where Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action sat in the previous framework program, so FP7, where it actually sat under people. And the reason that this is important, because it's still a fundamental ethos behind Marie-Curie, is to support people, and people is researchers, and to support them in their career development and to ensure that they have excellent working conditions within the EU and further afield while they're doing their research. And this is something that really is important when you're putting together your individual fellowship application to keep in mind. So just a little bit about the individual fellowships call itself, just to make sure that we all have a base understanding. The individual fellowships are there to support experienced researchers, and by an experienced researcher we mean someone who has completed and is in possession of their PhD or has at least 4 years of full-time research experience. And the idea behind these fellowships is to support their mobility, their research and training, increase their opportunities both within and outside academia. And by outside academia, we do mean anything outside of academia. MSCA-IF are very open to what that could be that an NGO, a museum, other cultural institutions, small industrial SME, or even a large industrial partner. They're really quite open as to what that is, depending on the needs of your individual research project and where you'd like to go with your career. It also really supports the opportunities for international mobility, so within and beyond Europe. There are some very specific defined mobility eligibility criteria, but beyond that, there's really no limits in terms of nationality, age, or your career restrictions other than the minimum, which is you need to be classified as an experienced researcher. They really encourage the responsible research and innovation approach to your proposal. And these are all links to the policy documents, and I highly recommend that you do have a look through, even if it's just to read the summaries, to understand what is really trying to be achieved within the Skłodowski-Curie actions. The beneficiaries and the researchers must follow the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. And the working conditions provided to those of you who are awarded a fellowship must be in line with the European Charter for Researchers, the Code of Conduct for Recruitment, and all this is outlined in an information packet that the fellows will receive upon award of the fellowship. And you can have, again, follow the links, and it'll give you the outlines and link you to the documents. The European Charter for Researcher and the Code of Conduct for Recruitment, we highly recommend that you actually refer to these in your proposals in the relevant sections, particularly when you're talking about the research environment that you'll be hosted in, and also when discussing your career and training opportunities. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the proposal. So just to go very briefly, there are two main types of individual fellowships. The first is the European fellowship. So this is what we tend to think of maybe first when we're talking about Skłodowski-Curie individual fellowships. These are for someone either who is currently located in an EU member state or an associated country and wants to move to another member state or associated country, or someone who is located outside of the EU and would like to move back into the EU. Within that, you've got the subject-specific panels, and the subject-specific panels have the standard mobility requirement of having not lived in that member state for more than, or worked in that member state for more than 12 months in the last 36 months. So this is what we call the standard panel. So these are the large number of subject-specific panels. You also have 3 multidisciplinary panels: the Society and Enterprise panel, the Career Restart panel, and the Reintegration panel, which have slightly different mobility requirements. The mobility requirements for those 3 panels is that you cannot have carried out your main activity, i.e. research, in the country of the host beneficiary for more than 3 years in the 5 years immediately before the call deadline. Now, the Society and Enterprise panel is really limited to host institutions that are non-academic. So this would be if you wanted to be hosted by an industrial partner or an NGO or a museum or other types of cultural institutions, which would not be defined as being academic. And the person that is involved in defining whether they're academic or not, unfortunately, is the Commission, and this will be dependent on how they were validated initially. So if you're not sure on what their status might be, then you need to talk to the proposed host institution. We do know that a lot of museums, for instance, actually fall under the academic category because of the amount of research that they do, even though you might think that they would fit into the non-academic category. So it's really important to look. The Career Restart panel is really there to support anyone who has had a career break. So if you've been out of a research career, so i.e. not having a research contract for at least 12 months in the last 18 months immediately before the call deadline, then you would be eligible for the Career Restart panel. So this could be that you've been on maternity leave, long-term sick, or just unfortunately not been able to have an actual research contract. So you also could have maybe no research contract, but an arrangement with an institution that allows you to use their library, and that is fine. You would still be eligible for the Career Restart panel. The other multidisciplinary panel is the Reintegration panel. And this is really designed to encourage people who are either long-term residents of Europe or European nationals who are currently outside of Europe and would like to come back in. Now, the benefit to the Society Enterprise Career Restart and Reintegration Panel is that they have, well, particularly for the Career Restart and Reintegration Panel, they have a separate weighting, which means actually their success rate is higher than through the standard panel. The Society and Enterprise panel actually has its own dedicated budget and actually also has a much higher success rate. If you are someone who would fit the definition of a career restart, someone to apply for the career restart panel or the reintegration panel, and equally are thinking about maybe applying for the standard panel, the recommendation is usually to go for the career restart or the reintegration panel because they do have a higher success rate. If upon during the evaluation, the commission decide that you actually are not eligible for the reintegration or career restart panel, then they will look to move you to the panel to which you would be eligible for. So for the reintegration panel, they would move you to the appropriate subject panel. For the CAR panel, if you have applied for a 24-month career restart project, then you would also be able to be moved to a standard panel. Unfortunately, though, if you did apply for the 36-month CAR restart panel, there is no equivalent panel to which you'd be able to be moved to. So it's just something to bear in mind. The second type of fellowship is the global fellowships. And the idea have the global fellowships if you have someone currently based in a member state or an associated country or someone who is a long-term resident. They don't have to just be a national who's then going to go and spend 12 to 24 months in what is termed the outgoing phase at a host institution in a third country, and this can be a third country located anywhere in the world, and then having a mandatory return phase back into the member state or an associated country. The eligibility in terms of mobility links to the third country, not to the EU host. So you cannot have lived for more or resided or carried out your work for more than 12 months in the last 36 months in the country of your third country host institution. For the global fellowships, there are no multidisciplinary panels. It is only subject-specific panels. So hopefully that you understand the two differences. We do have a question about getting in touch with a potential advisor, supervisor. Just to say that on the EURAXESS portal, some institutions will advertise that they are open and actively looking for fellows. Also, if there's institutions that you might be wanting to look at, again, they often will have put advertisements on their individual pages to say that they are actively looking. However, the best thing to do is actually to look through the literature, talk to colleagues. They will have recommendations of people that you can then directly contact, and that tends to be the most successful. Or if you've been to a conference and you've spoken with someone else who's attended, you think that would be a really interesting person to work with and to contact them directly. Just a little bit on the budget, just to say that the amount is set out in the guide for applicants, and I will reiterate many, many times, the guide for applicants will become your best friend during the proposal development. The researcher unit cost is the amount that effectively becomes your salary. That goes directly to the researcher. The institutional costs will go to the institution. Now, altogether, all the funding goes from the EC to the beneficiary, and then the beneficiary, i.e. the host institution, will then pay you your salary according to the researcher unit cost to which you are eligible for. The research training and networking costs are there for you to spend as needed in accordance with your project needs against research and training activities. The management and indirect costs are used by the institution to support you, so provide you with desk space, basic laptops, all those kind of internal costs that they incur as a result of hosting you. The family allowance is only for those who up at the call deadline meet the definition, which means either they have a dependent child or they have a legal, they can demonstrate that they have an equivalency to marriage or are married, and it is at the call deadline. So unfortunately, if that changes during the course of the project, you cannot then claim the family allowance. Also, just to remind people that the living allowance is the gross amount, and most institutions in Europe, particularly almost all of them in the UK, will put together the living and mobility allowance, and if eligible for the family allowance as one, and that will be your full salary. So all those 3 allowances would then be subject to taxation. If you've got questions on the budget and how it will work for you, then it's really important that you talk to your host institution, because this will be different in different member states. It's different taxation rules and the way that it will be paid out. Also, if you're going to a member state that does not use the euro, then they will have to add additional exchange rate added onto this. So it's really important that you discuss this with them ahead of time so that you have a clear understanding of what the financial packet that you will be receiving will look like. This is just to remind people that the call is open and the deadline is 9th of September at 5 p.m. Brussels time, and they are very, very tight on 5 p.m. Brussels time. If for some reason you're having trouble with submission, do take screenshots and keep them and submit them to the IT help desk at the time. If you aren't able to prove that there was a problem, then unfortunately there's nothing that they can do to help you if you aren't able to submit in time. As I said, the deadline is the 9th of September. You will hear usually at the end of January, but the timing that they will give you is February 2021 to find out the outcome. The grant agreements between the beneficiaries, so i.e. your host institution, and the commission will be signed between February and March. And then you could start between March 2021 and September 2022. And again, you really do need to think about when you would be wanting to take up this proposal, because as part of the evaluation criteria, you need to be able to justify your activities and the timing of your activities. So for instance, at the moment, you might be thinking of COVID and you might be working on something and talking about vaccine development, for instance, and how timely that is right now. But you also have to think that if you're not starting until September 2022, is that still going to be timely and relevant? So your justification really has to be in line with the timing of what you are proposing in terms of your start date for your proposal. Just had a quick question about the family being engaged. Unfortunately, being engaged does not qualify you for the family allowance. It must be legally recognized. Now, again, it's important to talk to your host institution. Some member states and some third countries do allow cohabitation and legally recognize cohabitation, which would then enable you to be eligible for the family allowance. Unfortunately, the UK does not recognize cohabitation unless you are coming from a country that recognizes it. So this is just something, again, to discuss with your host institution. The ethos is submit early and submit often. Commission will collect the proposals at the deadline, so you can submit as many times as you want up into that deadline call, and we recommend that you do that. So I'm just going to go through the application process. We get a lot of questions about how this actually works in practice, and then we'll go through the evaluation criteria. So if you haven't done so already, I highly recommend that you register on the Funding and Tenders Opportunity Portal. So this is the EU portal, and create what is called an ECAS account. The portal is where you'll find everything from upcoming calls. You'll be able to submit proposals, but it's also the platform that you will use if you are lucky enough to be awarded a project, and where you'll need to enter everything in terms of your deliverables and reporting. It's really important that you get in touch with any of the research support offices at your host institution, as many of them will be able to help you with this process. You'll need to find out from them who are the relevant people that you need to add to the application. As I said, submit early and often, and really keep that guide for applicants in front of you. It really is crucial and sets out everything that you need in order to apply and to be successful in your application. There's a question that we get quite a lot, which is who actually submits the application. And the reason we get this a lot is that people need to remember that this is not just your, as a fellow's application, it is actually the supervisor's application as well. And the way that the grant is structured, it is a grant agreement between the institution and the commission. Unfortunately, it is not between you and them. So by you and the commission, I mean. So the legal responsibility lies with the host organization in the member state or an associated country. The supervisor, or often they'll have appointed someone else, often within the research office, can act on behalf of that organization until the grant agreement is signed. And as such, only the supervisor or the other individual who has been given the capacity to act on behalf of the organization should press the submit button. And also, if any other actions need to be taken in the name of the host organization until that grant agreement is signed. Now, the electronic submission system does allow for the researcher to submit the proposal, but he or she should really consider the implications of doing this and have a discussion very early on with the supervisor as who will be responsible for hitting the submit button. When you've gone into the call, what you will see here is depending on which panel you are wanting to apply for, either the career restart, reintegration, society and enterprise, the standards, so this would be the subject panels, or the global fellowships, you would then click one of these submission buttons. Once you've clicked one of those buttons, you will be presented with a page that allows you to enter in the different contacts. Once you've hit OK, you'll then come to this form. And this is kind of really the main page that you want to be working on. This is where you can go and edit the administrative forms, but this is also where you can download the Word versions of the template. It's really important that you use the current template and not the template from last year. Small changes are made, which can have quite a big impact on the proposal, particularly for the evaluators who will expect it to be laid out in a certain way. You will then upload your completed proposal as a PDF here. And then when you go through to the administrative forms, you have a page that looks like this. You can either scroll through using these buttons at the top, or you can just actually work your way through. If you've got questions on how to fill in this form, there's more information here, or in Annex 3 of the Guide for Applicants. All right, sorry, something seemed to have happened with my animation, but there's some specific screen that should be showing up here for what the supervisor can input and what the research can input, and I'm not sure what has happened, but it's really important that you do put in all the full supervisory details. So this will be their name, their host institution, their department, and that should go in there. And then for the researcher, this will include your own name, your dates that accord to when you received your PhD and where you are currently located. Often the research administrative offices can actually help with this basic administrative data being put into the system. You will also have a number of call-specific questions. So for the standard fellowships, they will have specific questions about whether or not you had military service, whether or not you meet the definition of a refugee. Again, will there be a secondment, yes or no? And if yes, then there'll be some additional information that you'll be required to put in. For the global fellowships, again, one of the things they will ask is, are you a national, yes or no, of an associate? And if you are not a national of an EU member state or an associated country, then this is where they will want to assess whether or not you meet the definition of a long-term resident. And then they will ask you to put in the specific dates to which you have been in that member state or associated country. And it really is specific dates. We often get questions of, oh, I roughly came in about October. Unfortunately, as you can see here, it really is day, month, year, and they take the date to the actual call deadline. So unfortunately, it is very, very specific. Just to briefly talk about the difference between a secondment, which will come up again. A secondment is a very specific arrangement that the fellow will have with another organization, or that other organization has agreed for the duration of the secondment to take on the supervisory responsibility for them. That could be, and the secondments can only happen in another EU member state, and there's some very specific rules regarding their duration, but in relation to the number of months that you will be involved in the fellowship, and also where they can happen for things like the global fellowship. So for a global fellowship, you could have a secondment at the very, very beginning of the outgoing phase to the host institution in the EU member state. Otherwise, the secondments are spent during the time of the return phase. And this is very different from a short stay or a short visit, which can happen anywhere in the world. And this is just to say, we'll talk about it a little bit more when we're talking about putting the proposal together. But just to say, there's no benefit or not of including or not including a secondment, it really comes down to the individual needs of your research project and your justification for including or not including them in the proposal. So do not just add one in because you think it's going to give you brownie points in terms of the evaluators, because that will be spotted by the evaluators and could actually have a detrimental effect on your proposal. All right. We also get a lot of questions about if you do have a partner organization, how do you add them into the administrative forms? For the global fellowships, in the very first page, step 4 parties, you would be asked to include the third country host organization there. For secondments as well, you would then need to, as I said, under the specific questions here, you'll get a pop-up window if you hit yes, and you'll be asked to add the information in. And then in part B, which is the actual written part of the proposal, you'll have a capacity table under section 5 where you need to include the capacities of the participating organizations. For the proposal, it's really, really important that you follow the formatting guidelines set out in the guide for applicants. So for example, minimum font size 11, the margins must need to be at least 15 millimeters. And the tables are really there for illustrative purposes and should not contain the core text itself. The page formatting will be checked. And if it's deemed to not meet the page limits, it will be adjusted. And unfortunately, if the adjustment means that any of the pages end up beyond the maximum page length, then they will not be evaluated. They will not be read by the evaluators. The footnotes are for literature references only, and this is regardless of your subject discipline. So if in your subject discipline, you would normally include the list of references at the back of the proposal, you would not do that in this case. In this case, this will go into the footnotes. If you're in a subject discipline, which usually have quite lengthy footnotes with large descriptors, you really need to think about whether or not that descriptor is needed and whether it's more appropriate to put into the actual text. If you spend have a very large footnote, which effectively takes up half of the page, but doesn't necessarily add value, you've then lost half of that page of text from the proposal itself. Unlike other grants, such as European Research Council grants, any information that's provided through the hyperlink will be disregarded. And just to say that for the Gantt chart, tables, and footnotes, you can go to a minimum font size of 8. Part B, so this is actually written proposal. What does it include? Well, first of all, make sure you do, as I said before, download the templates. Respect all page limits. It includes part B1, which is a maximum of 10 pages, and what we will focus on, which is on the excellence, impact, and implementation sections. And then part B2, of which there is no overall page limit, but there are some indicative page lengths. For example, and this is where one of the changes is for the CV of the fellow. It now gives it as an indicative page length. In previous years, there was a defined page limit for the CV of the fellow. Part B2 also is where you will find section 5, which is the capacities of the participating organizations. So this includes all partner organizations as well as the host institution. It's also where you'll need to include any ethics. And if you are going on a global fellowship, it is also where you need to include the letter of commitment. The letter of commitment is only needed from partner organizations involved in a global fellowship. If you are involved in a global fellowship, it's important that you get this letter of commitment signed as early as possible. It can take quite a while, unfortunately, depending on the setup of some institutions to actually get the letter signed. And this is just to reiterate that the letter of commitment is only for the outgoing phase, and to remind those applying for a global fellowship that if you do not include the letter of commitment, then your proposal will be deemed to be ineligible and will unfortunately not be evaluated. So the key thing to really think about when putting your proposal together is the evaluation criteria. The evaluators themselves do not get any other additional information than what you receive. And the training of that which they do receive is very comprehensive, but it is against this exact evaluation criteria, which is excellence, impact, and implementation. And you can see here that excellence gets 50% of the score of the total score, impact is 30, and implementation is 20. And in case that multiple projects score the same, exactly the same, what they will then look is who scored the most under excellence, who scored the most under impact, who scored the most under implementation. They will also look at who had addressed gender, and then also who is involved non-academic organizations. So just to go through a few things to do with the evaluation criteria and what they're really looking for under the different sections. So for the quality and credibility of the research and innovation project, what they really want is you to have a clear, focused research objectives, make sure you have a really good overview of the project, explain why it's novel, how it's groundbreaking, and have a very clear planned methodology. And the methodology that you need to think about as well is how this will relate to the training element. The key thing that is really important, and I cannot stress enough, is that this is not just a research project. This is a research and training project. It is training through research. It's very easy to get wrapped up in the science and kind of forget about the training until afterwards, but they really need to be integral. So when you're thinking about your methods and the approach that you will take, it doesn't have to be methods that you already know. These could be methods that you can then learn and as part of your training objectives. What you need to think about is where you want to go with your career and what skills, be them research or otherwise, that you need to actually reach that at the end of the fellowship, within 3 years after the fellowship, 5 years, 10 years, those types of things. It's really, really crucial. As I mentioned already, gender is also quite important. The tagline is, if your researcher now or at any point in the future might be used for humans, there will be a gender dimension to your research. And there's some resources about that after. So this is just something to think about, and it is an explicit evaluation criteria. Now, it might be that you are fortunate or unfortunate enough, depending on how you might look at it, to work in an area that really is not have any relevance to gender. So for example, some areas of mathematics or maybe high particle physics. And that is fine. If it's not appropriate, then you don't need to try and address that in your proposal. What you want to think about is also how your project is really going to open up your career and collaboration opportunities. The second element that's, as I mentioned, that's really important, that it brings up the training, but it's the two-way transfer of knowledge between the researcher and the host institution and any partner organizations. Often it's very difficult if you have a more senior supervisor and you are a more junior researcher to think, what am I actually bringing to that supervisor? Actually, you're probably bringing a lot more than you realize. You're bringing a network with you because you're coming from somewhere else. You probably have some skills and knowledge that they might not have, particularly if you're moving disciplines or you're moving sectors. It might be that you're within your own, the supervisor, you're not necessarily transferring as much to, and maybe you're gaining the most from, but they will have other people in their group that you are then bringing knowledge to within their department, within the center, depending on how they're set up. So it's not just about what you're bringing to your individual supervisor, but what you're bringing to the research environment to which you will be working. And you need to be very clear about how that knowledge is going to be transferred. Will you be participating in seminars? How often will you be participating in seminars? Will you be doing, workshops? Will you have mentoring or supervisory role over a PhD or master's student as part of your research? These are the discrete things that they want to see. So you need to be very clear and discrete and in the activities that you're putting into this project. As I mentioned, it really is training through research. And we see a lot of projects fail because they've either really focused on the research or less often they've really focused on the training. And it's about getting that balance and really demonstrating that they are fully, both elements are integral to each other. The research project makes a focus for the fellowship, but should be framed in the context of training. So really think about all the different training that you might need in order to be successful, both for the fellowship, but in future career prospects. For the global fellowships, it's also about how you will take any knowledge that you have gained during the outgoing phase and bring that back during the return phase. For the quality of the supervision and the integration of the team, again, it's really important to think about the qualifications and experience of the supervisor. This does not mean that you need to have a very experienced supervisor. And in fact, we often encourage more junior researchers to actually use this as a tool in order to develop their leadership and supervisory skills and to start to build their own research groups and labs. What you need to think about is what experience have they had? Have they supervised master's students or undergraduate students? Do they lead on any internal committees or external committees through other networks that they might be involved in? So looking at all the different experiences that supervisor might have that would then be able to demonstrate that they will be successful in mentoring you and supervising you for the duration of your fellowship. If you are going to have, if they are quite junior, they might choose to have another member of staff supervise you as well, so provide additional mentorship. Or if it's moving disciplines, again, they might decide that having someone else who has additional expertise involved is really important. Then you need to discuss this and how this will also contribute to the environment in which you are working in your integration and knowledge and development. So think about the hosting arrangements and really think about your career development plan. And for the global fellowships, unfortunately, this has to be for both the outgoing and incoming phases. So unfortunately, the length of proposal is not any different for the global fellowship and for a European fellowship, but you do actually need to put in more information for the global fellowship. Everything that you put in for your host in the EU member state must be repeated for the host in the third country. For the capacity of the researcher to reach and reinforce a position of professional and maturity or independence, again, think about the candidate's track record. Show how this will then help them to kind of continue through this fellowship, that this fellowship will help them with their current trajectory to move forward. If they've had the career break, how this fellowship will actually help bring them back into the research environment and help them with their career development and that type of dialogue. Often we get asked, is it okay to say at the end of this, we hope to have a permanent job? Absolutely, these are the types of things that you need to be thinking about. If you currently have a permanent job, we also get questions, can we still apply? The answer is still yes. What you need to think about is where you are currently. Say if you're a junior lecturer and you want to go to a senior lecturer, or you're a senior lecturer and you want to go to become a professor, what are the skills that you will need and how will this fellowship enable you to get those skills so that you can progress in your career? Really think about your CV, make sure that it really brings out all the relevant information. And again, you might find, unlike in a normal CV where it's really bullet points, you actually have a little bit of narrative to really help to explain and pull out these points. It's about explaining how the fellowship will have an enormous positive impact on the researcher's career. And you really need to be able to demonstrate the capacity for independent thinking and leadership of that researcher. Again, if they are more junior, how will this fellowship, what opportunities will they get through this fellowship to actually develop those skills? So if one of the things that they're missing is they've never organized a conference before, maybe as a result of the fellowship during the 2 years or the 3 years, depending on the type of fellowship, they'll actually organize a conference. So it's those types of activities that you could think. This relates both to their career development and the training and also the research needs, because that would be a really good way to disseminate the information. So again, showing how these types of activities all tie together is really important. For impact, really think about enhancing the potential and the future career prospects of the researcher. So this, again, as you can see, a lot of the same ideas are being repeated as what we've discussed already from some of the other elements. All right. It's not a requirement to do during the proposal development stage, but often it can be really helpful to do a bit of career development planning. There's a number of tools that can help you to do that, to help identify and help the researcher think about where they want to be. Where do they want to be at the end of the fellowship, 5 years, 10 years, and what are the skills that they are going to need to get there? What are the new competencies that will be required, and how will these be achieved throughout the lifetime of the project? Another key thing that unfortunately we see is often missed or isn't very well justified and explained in the proposal are the proposed measures to exploit and disseminate the action results. Be very clear about your planning and how you expect to disseminate the project results. And dissemination shouldn't be left to the very end of the project. You want to think about how this will occur throughout the 2 or 3 years of your project. Again, depending on your project, there might be intellectual property, you might be developing something to explain how, if this is the case, the dissemination would then feed into exploitation. How will you ensure that these results are actually targeted to the correct stakeholders, be that or peers, so scientific industry, society, other scientific research fields? And again, really thinking about the planned dissemination and exploitation activities, and think about how you might need to target them, and then also thinking about the gender element in these as well, where different methods need to be used depending on the gender and or the different target groups. Be very clear and concise with it in the proposal. Many institutions within the EU actually have designated teams to help with exploitation and dissemination and public engagement, and having a really good communication with your supervisor and the host institution will really help you in developing these sections, because you'll be able to go to those designated teams and say, actually, what would you recommend? How can we work and develop this together? And it will really strengthen these sections of your proposals to get that professional input from these units within the institutions that you would like to go and work in. Again, this is just kind of more about the communicating of the results, this time not so much in sense of dissemination and exploitation, but more in terms of public engagement. How will you have a detailed communication strategy and timeline to actually create awareness of your research and MSCA-IF actions more generally as well? Again, thinking that it's not just at the end, but throughout the lifetime of the project. Go beyond just the obvious. So everybody will do a website. Is there other things that you can do beyond just a website or a Twitter account, for instance? There are a number of Marie Curie funded events, particularly the European Researchers' Night, which occur every year to really help highlight European funded projects. But there are other things as well. So at the moment, there's the call for Science is Wonderful. So this will be attached to the Research and Innovation Days that are held this year will be virtually in Brussels to really engage citizens in European funding. The Science is Wonderful is a chance for current and past Marie Curie Fellows to really highlight their research to a really wide audience. And this usually everything from young school children to members of the public. There's also at the moment a call open for a Falling Walls Lab. So this is enables researchers and young entrepreneurs a chance to pitch their idea with kind of a 3 minutes. And winners going to Berlin in November, where they get to further pitch with a chance of winning a bit of money and backing it, but also to meet other excellent researchers and innovators to really help to develop your research ideas. So there's a number of these different types of activities which are promoted through Marie Curie to really help with this beyond just the Researchers' Night. And there's some specific guidance from the Commission about communicating your project, which you might find quite helpful when putting these sections together. With regards to the implementation, so this relates to the cohesion and effectiveness of the work plan, the appropriateness and the allocation of tasks and resources. So this is really about explaining your work plan and your resources and how what you're planning will ensure success of your project. And that's a success from a scientific, but also a career development ethos. So it's really important to explain the number of person months that you are planning for your project and why this is appropriate. And again, this comes back to really thinking about proposed start dates and why you're justifying the start date against the objectives and the expected outcome and impact of the proposal. Your work plan should be very clear and realistic. It should show the desired impacts. And there is a very specific template for the Gantt chart, and you need to, as outlined in the template, and that is the Gantt chart that you need to use. It needs to be very clear. And often, again, some of the feedback that we get is that the Gantt charts were not clear, they were not detailed enough. So this is something to be wary of, and it's a very easy place to lose or gain points, as it were, in terms of the evaluation. Another thing to really think about is the appropriateness of the management structure and procedures and thinking about risk. So describing the organization and management structure, again, you might be able to get some support from this from the research offices at your host institution. Many of them will have almost set templates that can be used, or can tell you what should or should not be included. They can give you numbers, for example, how many other MSCA-IF fellows that they've had, what support is put in place, what and those types of activities. So it's really important to speak with them about this, particularly for this section. If you are involving any entities with a capital or legal link, then again, you need to discuss their involvement and how any risks that might be associated with their involvement are being mitigated. We do get questions about COVID and risk. If, depending on the timing of your project, that you think that unfortunately there still might be a risk because of the COVID containment measures, then this is something that you can mention under the risk mitigation section. But again, you do need to think about this very carefully. We do not know how things will proceed in the future. And also, if you are not looking to starting to September 2022, then it might be very difficult to make the case to really say actually the risks that are in place now will still be in place then. Again, this kind of reiterates back to the appropriateness of the institutional environment, to the need and necessity to speak with your host institution, who will be able to help you again with this section. All right, describe the contribution of the beneficiary and any partners to the research and training activities. And the question that they're asking here is, why is the host institution that you have picked the right place for you to do your fellowship? Why have you chosen to go there and not chosen to go somewhere else? It doesn't mean that they have to have every piece of equipment or every piece of knowledge that you need, because you will build that in through either short visits or secondments. But why would you spend the bulk of your time there? Why are you going there? Why do you want to work with this researcher? Why do you want to work with this institution? And you need the same description for the global fellowships as well for the outgoing phase. You also need to demonstrate a commitment that the institution and the supervisor have towards you as a researcher. So if you have a supervisor or potential supervisor who you know is going to be retiring very shortly after starting, what you need to think about is, are there measures in place to ensure that they will be able to continue to support you throughout your fellowship? And this is where the additional supervisors might come in handy, or you might know that actually they will have some sort of arrangements in place after their retirement in order to be able to support you. So it's really important just to think about these things as you're going forward. So a little bit on proposal advice, and I'll try and pick up some of the questions after I go through the proposal advice. Is the reminder that this is the supervisor's grant, so they put this on their CV as you do as a fellow. Really, it's important that both the PI and the fellow are involved in writing the proposal. And a lot of the feedback that we get from the evaluators is that they can really tell when the fellow has written it all on their own, with little to no support from their supervisor, so the principal investigator, and or the host organization. And unfortunately, it's usually obvious because they are, generally speaking, weaker applications. And so it's really important that you do speak with them. These are a different type of proposal than you might have been used to writing before. So getting advice and guidance and support is really, really crucial. The fellow, you do need to have a strong CV, but this is in relationship to your career stage. So if you've just finished your PhD and the expectation for your field is someone just finishing a PhD would not have a publication, then that is absolutely fine. If you are 10 years post-PhD and have had a permanent position for the past 10 years, they're probably going to expect you to have a few publications. So again, you really need to think about your discipline and what is expected for your discipline and where you are within your career stage. So there is no template and expectation of what an ideal candidate will look like. It's really important that you read all the called documentation and the evaluation criteria. As I've said before, the guide for applicants is incredibly important and needs to be with you throughout the entire writing process. Really do consider any relevant EU policy documents. MSCA-IF is wonderful, it's completely bottom up. There's no predefined research areas. But if your project does have EU relevance, then again, it's important to read those. And some of the other links that I've sent through, like about the researchers, the code of conduct for researchers, those again are important to read because it can really help you in setting out what you want to achieve in terms of your training and development and what the expectations are from the institution. Do make it easy for the evaluators to find the information. They often have 15 to 20 proposals to read and a very short defined time frame in which to do it. They take this very seriously, but as you know, when you're putting this together, it is not a short application. They are doing this in addition to their normal working day. If they have to look for something, they might find something else that you don't want them necessarily to see, which then leads them to question. So you really want to make it as easy as possible. And this is also where following the template is really important.
Thank you very much, Branwen, for this very insightful presentation. I'm afraid I have to stop you due to lack of time. We do have some questions.
Yeah.
And perhaps we could address those questions. I don't know if you see them or do you want me to read them for you?
I can see some of them, but not all of them, it seems like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two questions about secondment. What type of activities are we expected to carry out at the secondment location? And is researcher expected to physically spend time at the secondment location? Must the secondment organization be in the host country?
Okay, so the secondment organization does not need to be in the host country. It can be, but it has to be in an EU member state or an associated country. It cannot be in a third country. So if your secondment organization is in a different EU member state or an associated country, then the expectation is that you would be in that member state for the period of the secondment. Right? Obviously, if it is in the, so for example, in the UK, if you go to another UK institution for your secondment, and it's a commutable distance, then there would not be the expectation that you would move there.
Okay, another one is about eligibility criteria.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about the types of activities very quickly, or?
Yes, please. Okay, please continue.
Yeah. For the activities for the secondment, it really depends on your individual project and what you need to do. So there's no predefined activities of what equates to in a secondment. The difference between a short visit and a secondment has to do with the supervisory arrangement. So if you are organizing a secondment, then you need to identify someone at that partner organization who will supervise you during the secondment. And that's what makes the difference between a secondment and a short visit. Also, a short visit is a bit of a misnomer. They're not necessarily short. They can be a number of months. They can occur anywhere in the world, so even in a third country, but there is no supervisory arrangement at that institution. The supervisory arrangement is retained by your original host for the Marie Curie Fellowship.
Thank you. The next one is about the eligibility criteria.
Yeah.
Being in possession of a doctoral degree, does it mean that the applicant must have the degree by the deadline of the application, it is 9th of September, or before the grant start?
It has to be by the 9th of September.
Clear. Another one is about multidisciplinary panels. They appears to be narrow categories. The person who is asking don't seem to fit in any. He or she is more towards jump-starting the career instead of restarting it, since he or she need to be under the mentorship of an, okay, it's rather a comment than a question. Let's skip that. Okay. We will share.
So just one thing to say about the evaluators, maybe this will address the point. They will find the right evaluators for your proposal. So if you submit under, say, the life sciences panel, and the chair decides that the evaluators who are the 3 evaluators or one of the 3 evaluators who are assigned to your proposal actually aren't the best people to read your proposal, they will find new evaluators. So they will do their utmost to ensure that the right evaluators read your proposal regardless of the subject discipline to which you have been submitted under.
Thank you. The next one is about exploitation. What does exploitation mean in the impact section? Please provide examples.
So exploitation would be, say you have developed a widget and that widget could revolutionize another widget. Then there would be about how would you exploit that? So how would you link up your findings with industry for them to then further the development or get that widget into market? That would be the easiest.
I hope it's clear enough. Yeah. Does the start date for work plan have to be really specific? It means the exact date, month, and year?
So it doesn't necessarily have to be the 3rd of January 2022, but it should be January 2022. there is the expectation and the understanding that these things will shift a little bit during the course of the project as your project develops, as the field develops. If there's going to be a dramatic shift, so either you decide not to do a specific activity anymore, or you thought you were going to do something in January and you're going to do it a year later, then that would be a discussion that you would have with your project officer to make an amendment to the grant agreement, and it's absolutely fine.
Thank you. I'm not sure how to understand the next one, but maybe you will. Does the two-way exchange of knowledge must reflect in the particular research problem as well?
Does not in the research question that you are trying to achieve, it doesn't necessarily, but it's about what you are going to be bringing more broadly and more generally to them, and vice versa.
Thank you. The duration of the project for individual fellowship of 24 months of duration. Can we manage it for 3 years with a modification, for example, each 8 months for the first year, second year, and third year?
Okay. So for the European fellowships, there is a provision for part-time working for personal or professional reasons, which would then enable you to extend because the number of fellow months, person months, has to be maintained. So if you went part-time, then for 2 years, then you could do that over a 4-year period of time. Or you would have to look at doing some sort of suspensions, but this would be a discussion that you would have at the grant agreement preparation stage. You would not put this in the proposal. You would write the proposal as you're going to do it full time for the 24 months.
Thank you. Can you say something more about successful rate? The question is, what was the acceptance rate in the previous calls?
So in general, the success rate is just less than 16% over all the panels. It is higher, it's about 17% for the multidisciplinary panel, so then that's an average. The Society and Enterprise had a very high success rate last year because very few people actually submitted to the Society and Enterprise panel.
Okay.
Just to say that there are specific breakdowns in terms of success for different member states. So if you do really want to go into that, then it's again worth talking to your host institution and the NCP, the country of the host that you'd like to go to, and they can give you the very specific for that member state.
Thank you. We are answering also questions directly, some of them. Should we have English qualification tests, example TOEFL, ELTS, to apply for MyAskWhatAskReactions reactions?
You don't need them as part of the application, but if you are coming to, for example, the UK, which just depending on the type of visa that you would be applying for, you might need to do a language test, but it is not a requirement for the proposal itself.
Okay, with 2 minutes to close, Suzanne, do you want to add something?
Do you want me to answer the question about UK eligibility that's come up?
If you can, of course. I mean, it's a sensitive issue. So.
No, that's fine. For the current call, there is the what is called the withdrawal agreement. So this is agreement between the UK government and the European Union, which stipulates that the UK can continue to participate in those calls which fall under the current multi-annual financial framework to the end of those calls. So i.e. UK host institutions can continue to be engaged in and apply for European funding for the lifetime of the project. So you could apply to come to the UK with a UK host and continue to receive EU funding for that project for the lifetime, regardless of when your project starts, i.e. even if it's after the December 31st, 2020.
Thank you very much. Maybe a little bit of self-promotion here. Some of the questions can be addressed through our portal, so please visit EURAXESS.org. For the specific countries, please visit ASEAN Hub or Korea Hub. We try to answer those questions on individual basis as well, so please feel free to contact us via our emails. We are here for you, and hopefully we will be able to provide you some support. Suzanne, any last words?
Yeah, just to add that we will publish this recorded webinar on our channel, so you can watch it again at your own leisure. And someone just asked a final question: can you share some successful proposals? And we do have some that have been given to us through the Net for Mobility network that Branwen is a member of. These are proposals where applicants agreed to have these published, so we will also be able to make these available to you to have a look at. There was a final question, Branwen, maybe to ask this for political correctness. People were asking, if I apply with a UK host, does that limit my chances?
Absolutely not. So last year we had the situation where the deadline was, so the results came out very close to when we were supposed to be the deadline for leaving. We had 287 successful applications last year. We were the highest and most successful member state, and we have been the previous years as well. So we still continue to do very well. You have to remember that the evaluators are expert and they evaluate against the evaluation criteria.
Exactly, and I think with this, let me just check whether we have one final question. No, someone is just saying thank you, which is perfect. And again, we will share the recording, and if Branwen agrees, we will check with her later on. Maybe we can also share the slides. So
yeah, I'm very happy for the slides to be shared. That's fine.
Perfect. And on these slides, then we will make some additions. Tomasz and I will add a link to some of the resources that you can access, for example, proposals which are publicly available, and you can look at them. And please, by all means, always just contact us so we can either help you ourselves or we can connect you once again with the fabulous NCPs that we have in Europe, such as Branwen, to give you further advice. And I think with this, thanks so much, Branwen, for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone, and good luck.
Thank you for attending.
Fingers crossed. Stay safe, everyone.
Yes,
Bye.
exactly. Stay safe. Bye-bye.